Gen Z is often described as digital natives, hyperconnected, socially aware, and adaptable. But beneath those labels lies a harsher reality. Gen Z may be the most economically disadvantaged generation in modern history, not because of lack of effort or ambition, but because of the world they inherited. Unlike previous generations, Gen Z entered adulthood during overlapping crises. They grew up through the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, had their education disrupted by the pandemic, and entered the workforce during an era of high inflation, expensive housing, and shrinking job security. The timing alone has put them at a severe disadvantage. Housing is the most obvious pressure point. For Gen Z, homeownership feels almost unreachable. Prices have exploded far beyond wages, rents consume a massive share of income, and saving for a down payment is increasingly unrealistic. Earlier generations could reasonably expect to buy a home within a decade of working. For many in Gen Z, that expectation has vanished entirely. Then there's debt. Higher education was sold as the pathway to opportunity, yet Gen Z graduates often leave school burdened with loans that follow them for decades. At the same time, entry-level wages have failed to keep pace with living costs. Many are forced to rely on credit cards, buy now, pay later schemes, or family support just to stay afloat. Starting adult life already in debt fundamentally alters long-term prospects. Job security is another major break from the past. Gen Z is entering a labor market dominated by contract work, gig jobs, automation, and now artificial intelligence. Stable career ladders are disappearing. Even white-collar professions once considered safe are being disrupted. Gen Z is told to be flexible, but flexibility increasingly means permanent uncertainty. Inflation has only deepened the strain. Food, rent, transportation, insurance, and energy costs have surged, while wages lag behind. For Gen Z, inflation doesn't feel like a temporary spike. It feels like a permanent tax on everyday life. Saving is harder. Planning is harder. Optimism is harder. What makes Gen Z's situation uniquely frustrating is the disconnect between effort and reward. This generation is highly educated, highly productive, and technologically fluent. Yet the traditional milestones of adulthood, stable housing, financial security, family formation, are being delayed or abandoned. When effort no longer reliably leads to stability, belief in the system begins to break. That erosion of belief has consequences. Gen Z is more skeptical of institutions, more cautious about long-term commitments, and less convinced that playing by the rules guarantees success. This isn't entitlement, it's observation. They are responding rationally to incentives that no longer work. It is important to say this clearly. Gen Z's struggles are not the result of laziness or poor choices. They are the result of structural changes. Decades of rising inequality, asset inflation, debt expansion, and policy decisions that favored ownership over work and capital over wages. Does this mean Gen Z is doomed? No, every generation adapts. But it does mean Gen Z is starting from a weaker position than those before it. Fewer assets, more debt, less security, higher costs, and a future shaped by forces beyond individual control. The real danger is that Gen Z complains. It is that a generation losing faith in economic fairness leads to long-term instability. Societies rely on belief as much as productivity. When young people stop believing effort will be rewarded, disengagement follows. Gen Z may not be the weakest generation, but they may be the most squeezed. And unless housing, debt, wages, and opportunity are addressed at a structural level, that squeeze will only tighten.